Times Square, a place where dreams come true, or nightmares unfold. March 16, 2025. A typical night in the city that never sleeps. Tourists pose for pictures. Street performers draw in crowds. The air is electric. But within seconds, that energy turns to terror. A man, engulfed in fire, stumbles into the middle of the street. His arms flail wildly, his mouth open in a silent, agonized scream. The crowd freezes. A moment of disbelief. Then, chaos erupts. What was happening? Who was he? And who did this to him? This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a random tragedy. This was a message. Who would set a man on fire, in the middle of Times Square? The truth would take investigators down a twisted path of betrayal, revenge, and secrets long buried. And by the time they uncovered the full story, it was already too late. This case isn't just about a horrific crime, it's about what led to it. Secrets, betrayals, and a truth darker than anyone could have imagined. Stay with me, because this story is just beginning. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe, because the twists in this case will leave you speechless. The moment the flames erupted, time seemed to stop. Tourists, street performers, and everyday New Yorkers, all standing motionless, their faces twisted in shock. But only for a second. Then, the screaming started. It was chaos. People sprinted in every direction, some shouting for help, others frozen in place, their eyes locked on the man whose body was consumed by fire. The smell of burning flesh, the thick smoke curling into the air, Times Square had never seen anything like it. But was this an accident, or something far more sinister? NYPD officers scanned the faces of the stunned bystanders, their radios crackling as they called for backup. But amid the confusion, one fact was clear: whoever had done this was already gone. The first to arrive were the firefighters. They rushed toward the burning man, extinguishers in hand, desperately trying to put out the flames. But even as they doused his body with foam, the damage had already been done. The EMTs worked quickly, lifting his broken body onto the gurney, the ambulance doors slamming shut as they sped toward the nearest hospital. But even as they fought to keep him alive, one question loomed over the scene: who was he? And why had someone wanted him dead? Initial thoughts? Maybe a freak accident. Maybe someone lit themselves on fire in some kind of horrifying stunt gone wrong. After all, Times Square was no stranger to bizarre performances. But the more they looked, the less it made sense. NYPD's top brass were split. Some leaned toward an act of random violence, maybe a mentally unstable attacker, someone looking to cause fear and chaos. Others weren't so sure. If this was random, then why does it look so damn precise? No hesitation. No panic. Just walking away. As if they had just checked off an item on a to-do list. This wasn't random. This was a message. And the NYPD was about to find out exactly what it meant. Was this a case of random violence? Or was there something much, much deeper hiding beneath the surface? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you're as hooked as I am on uncovering the truth, make sure you subscribe. Because trust me, this story is just getting started. The man fighting for his life was no ordinary victim. He wasn't some unlucky tourist or a bystander in the wrong place at the wrong time. No, this man had a past. A past that had left behind more than just financial wreckage. It had left behind enemies, powerful ones. His name? David Langston. A name that once held weight on Wall Street. A name that, for years, had been whispered in the corridors of high finance. But not for the reasons you'd expect. David Langston wasn't just a banker, he was a man with secrets. Secrets that may have finally caught up to him. David Langston had it all: money, power, influence. He climbed the ranks of one of the most prestigious investment firms in the country, rubbing shoulders with the elite. To the outside world, he was a success story. A man who had built his fortune from the ground up. But behind the scenes? There was another story. One far darker. In 2018, whispers of fraud started to emerge. Investors were losing millions. The SEC launched an investigation. And then, like a house of cards, David's empire crumbled. One lawsuit turned into a dozen. Then 100. The name David Langston, once a symbol of success, became synonymous with corruption. David Langston had walked away from the wreckage relatively unscathed. No prison time. No major consequences. But for the people he left behind? The ones who lost everything? That was a different story. And the worst part? Many believed he had gotten away with it. David Langston knew he had enemies. He had received threats before, dozens of them. Emails. Letters. Even voicemails laced with venom. But David never took them seriously. He had money. He had security. And most importantly, he had walked away from worse. Or so he thought. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing was stolen. This wasn't some random street attack. It was targeted. It was precise. It was personal. But the question remained, who hated David Langston enough to do this? Was this just revenge for a financial crime? Or is there something even darker lurking beneath the surface? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because trust me, what we're about to uncover next will change everything. New York City is a place where no one is truly invisible. With over 36,000 surveillance cameras scattered across its streets, alleyways, and transit hubs, you can run, but you can't hide. And yet, the person who set David Langston ablaze seemed to do exactly that. They vanished into the night, leaving nothing behind, or so it seemed. The NYPD had their first lead, surveillance footage from multiple angles. The suspect wasn't just any passerby. No, this person had been waiting. Watching. The way they moved, the way they disappeared, it wasn't panic. It was planned. They weren't running. They weren't frantic. They knew exactly where they were going. The city's labyrinth of underground tunnels can be a perfect escape route, or a dead end. Detectives had to act fast. Every second that passed, the trail got colder. And then, they got their break. It was a sanitation worker who found it first, a discarded hoodie and gloves, dumped in a subway trash bin less than 30 minutes after the attack. The clothing was burned in places, the fabric still carrying the scent of gasoline. And then, the breakthrough they needed. On the inside of the gloves, pressed deep into the fabric, were fingerprints. James Jimmy Roswell. A man with a history. A history of arson. Jimmy Roswell wasn't just some petty criminal. He had a record stretching back over a decade, multiple arrests for arson-related crimes. Buildings burned to the ground, insurance fraud schemes, and yet, somehow, he had always managed to slip through the cracks of the justice system. Jimmy Roswell was a match. But was he the mastermind? The attack had been precise. The execution, flawless. It was almost too perfect. Jimmy Roswell had the skill, sure. But did he have the motive? And more importantly, was he acting alone? The question now wasn't just who did it. But why? Was Jimmy Roswell a lone wolf, or just the pawn in a much bigger game? Drop your theories in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. Because what we uncover next, it's going to change everything. David Langston wasn't just a man. He was a symbol. A Wall Street shark who had spent decades playing the game and winning. He built empires. He crushed competitors. And when the system worked in his favor, he walked away untouched while others lost everything. 3 years before he burned alive in the middle of Times Square, Langston was the central figure in one of the biggest financial scandals of the decade. Hundreds of investors wiped out. Millions of dollars gone. And yet, somehow, he never spent a single day behind bars. The fallout was catastrophic. Families ruined. Retirement stolen. Lives shattered. But one man took it personally. James Jimmy Roswell. A convicted arsonist, yes, but also a man with a very particular connection to David Langston's past. Jimmy Roswell wasn't just a random criminal. He was the son of a man David Langston had ruined. A man who lost everything in Langston's financial scheme. A man who swore revenge, and may have finally gotten it, years later, through the hands of his own son. Was Jimmy Roswell telling the truth? Or was he protecting someone? There was still one piece of the puzzle missing. Because while revenge is a powerful motive, it wasn't the only one in play. Was this a personal act of revenge? Or was Jimmy Roswell just the weapon in someone else's hand? The next chapter of this story will reveal the truth, but be warned, it's darker than you think. Drop your theories in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Because this is just the beginning. March 21st, 2025. After 5 long days of relentless investigation, the NYPD had their suspect. James Jimmy Roswell. A man with a history of arson, a past soaked in resentment, and a motive that made too much sense. But there was just one problem. He wasn't coming quietly. He knew they were coming. For a long, agonizing moment, there was silence. The kind that makes your stomach twist. Officers had seen situations like this before. A suspect backed into a corner, desperation taking over. That was when things got dangerous. Was this the end? Or was there still a way out? Down on the ground. Now. For a second, it looked like he might resist. Like he might make them pull the trigger. But then, it was over. Or at least, that's what they thought. You burned a man alive in the middle of Times Square. Why? Why? Because he ruined lives. And you know what? He deserved it. The room went still. The detective, a man who had heard it all before, felt the weight of those words. Because Jimmy Roswell wasn't just admitting to the crime. He was justifying it. But something wasn't right. Jimmy Roswell had the skill. He had the motive. But did he have the resources to pull off an attack like this, in the middle of Times Square? A second suspect? Jimmy Roswell was in custody. But was he really the mastermind? Or was there someone else pulling the strings? Drop your theories in the comments and subscribe, because the final truth is still waiting to be uncovered. The man who set Times Square ablaze had been caught. James Roswell was in police custody. But the case was far from over. Will your client be pleading insanity? Does Mr. Roswell have any remorse for what he did? The world wanted answers. But Roswell? He wasn't giving them. Not yet. James Roswell's defense team wasted no time. From the moment he was arrested, whispers of an insanity plea began circling. Could a man who planned and executed an attack this precise truly be unhinged? Or was this just another calculated move in his playbook? He has a history of psychological breaks, his attorney argued. He wasn't in control that night. But the prosecution had a different theory. One that sent chills down the courtroom. This wasn't random. This wasn't insanity. This was revenge. While Roswell prepared for trial, his victim was fighting to recover. The flames had nearly taken his life, but he had survived. The question now, would he testify? I know who did this to me. And I know why. The victim knew the truth. But was he afraid to speak it? The attack had shaken the city to its core. Times Square had always been a place of excitement, of spectacle. But now, it was something else. A place where danger felt just a little too close. Was this an isolated act of vengeance? Or was there more to fear? James Roswell was in custody. The city could breathe again. But for those who had followed the case closely, something didn't sit right. A lingering question, hanging over everything. Did James Roswell act alone? Or was he just a pawn in a much larger game of revenge? James Roswell is facing justice. But is he the only one who should be? What do you think? Was he the mastermind, or just a player in someone else's scheme? Drop your theories in the comments below. And if you love deep dives like this, don't forget to like and subscribe, because in the world of crime, the truth is never as simple as it seems.